Meanwhile, President Trump is speaking out after another immigration defeat in the courts. Yesterday, a federal judge in San Francisco blocked the president from cutting federal aid to sanctuary cities.
The judge ruled that the order was too broad and said the White House doesn't have the authority to attach new conditions to federal spending. In one of a series of tweets this morning, the president said, quote, "First, the Ninth Circuit rules against the refugee ban, and now it hits again on sanctuary cities. Both ridiculous rulings. See you in the Supreme Court."
Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe. He's a CBS News contributor and a Washington Post reporter. And Ed, looking at this ruling and the president's response this morning, does the Supreme Court appear to be the likely destination for this dispute?
Looks like the president would like it to get there, and it very well could, given that this once again is rolling through the courts. There's expected to be multiple challenges at one point or another. This one starts out on the West Coast in the San Francisco area, where they're challenging the idea that the president can order money taken away from a city. The judge that ruled in this case said that, in fact, it looks like he can't do that, that it's unconstitutional. And once again, in another federal court challenge to one of the president's policy decisions, his words are being used against him. What he has said on the campaign trail, what he has said in interviews, what he has said from the White House, and also in this case, what the Attorney General has said about what the administration hopes to do to so-called sanctuary cities. It is telling that judges continue to cite the public statements that have been made in the past and sort of remind the president that his words have consequences. Whether that holds up as the cases advance remains to be seen. But in this case, it looks like it's headed probably to the high court.
Right, that's exactly what got him into trouble with the travel ban. It was the words on the campaign trail that the judges took into consideration. Speaking of that, we're talking about looking close to the 100-day mark here, and we've seen the president's travel ban get blocked. We've seen the White House fail to secure funding for its border wall, and now we see this ruling on sanctuary cities. What does this mean for this administration, an administration that promised a lot in regards to immigration policy specifically?
Well, whether it's immigration or other issues, they're certainly struggling and pushing this week to make the case that at the 100-day mark they've done a lot. And in some ways they have, in others, you're right, they have fallen short. And remember, these were promises that then candidate, now President Trump, set out himself last year in a contract with the American voter. I think on immigration, they've probably struggled the most. This is one of the bigger areas that he talked about as a candidate, the idea that there would be a wall, undocumented immigrants would be rounded up and sent home, and that other steps would be taken regarding sanctuary cities. On two of those three fronts, they're struggling. On the one to remove undocumented immigrants, that process is certainly intensified. And the administration, I think, would rightly argue that they're merely enforcing existing laws. They were enforced differently during the Obama administration. They're pushing for other changes, and we'll see whether they ever get them. But when it comes to those other two parts, certainly they're struggling. And I think what's most notable here is that the spending agreement that we now expect Congress to pass by the end of the week to avoid a shutdown has no new money for the brick and mortar construction of any part or any semblance of a border wall by the end of this fiscal year. The White House concedes now that maybe the fight is best reserved for fiscal 2018, which begins in October. But this was probably his best shot, given that he's got the momentum coming into office. Republicans are willing to consider these things. The longer it persists, you're merely going to see broader debate about immigration and border security and the idea of building a physical wall. It is telling that over and over again you hear from border state Republicans like Jeff Flake or Will Hurd, the Texas congressman who represents the longest stretch of border, who say a physical barrier between the two countries is not something we want in this neck of the woods, is not something that would necessarily effectively prevent people from crossing the border, and would cause a host of issues. You guys in the recent days have done a great job of pointing out how there are Indian reservations, for example, down in Arizona that would require Congress to pass new laws to get back the land in order to build a wall, that there are rivers and other areas that would have to be rerouted. It's an impossible task for a Congress to deal with when they can't deal with just about anything, frankly.
Yeah, in fact, you wrote about that in today's Washington Post about the funding for the border wall. And I also want to ask you, Ed, about the plans of the administration to unveil a blueprint for this massive tax cut for businesses today. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said earlier that it will be the biggest tax cut in American history. So what are your sources on the Hill telling you about the reception this plan is going to receive from members of Congress?
Lukewarm so far because it goes farther than what Republicans had proposed, specifically House Republicans and the Speaker, Paul Ryan. The 15% tax level, for example, is something that goes beyond the 20%, I believe it was, that House Republicans were proposing. And the reason there's resistance, look, everyone wants to pay fewer taxes, but Republicans are worried about the cost of that you're going to blow huge holes in the federal deficit. You're going to make it very difficult for the government to pay for other things, and it's going to cause all sorts of fights. So we'll see. This is seen by members of Congress as an opening salvo and something that they will negotiate with the White House. But I think what we're going to see from the White House is a more active participation in the process. They've given up on the idea that Congress can do this alone because they believed that Congress could do the health care bill alone, and they failed to do it. The other thing to keep in mind here, it's a little nerdy, but it's important, how exactly Congress decides to do this. Will Republicans who control the House and Senate do this through what's called reconciliation, which means they can use special rules in the Senate and pass things with just majority vote, which they can do with the 52 Republicans that they have? Or will they do it in such a way that requires Democratic votes? And if it requires Democratic votes, let's just put it this way, the president's not going to get everything he wants.
All right, Ed O'Keefe from the Washington Post. As always, Ed, we appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Have a good day, guys. Take care.